we should have the Schulmans here since it's a chili cook-off, but you're gonna have to, maybe we'll ship some to you. But we've got yeah, that's the theme for it. Israel goes country. So I guess it was a way to both celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut and um, Israel, Israel's independence, and do it in a country way. But I don't know. We'll see. It's clever. I two things I like a lot, but I did not advocate for this and it was not my idea. But it sounds like it's gonna I mean a lot of people have put a lot of time in it and it looks like it's gonna be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's not I never heard of anything like this before. Israel goes country. Country music is not that big in Israel, by the way, just so you know. I know this because, as you all know, I'm bringing Joe Buchanan on our next trip to Israel with us, and we're trying to find some clubs and places that he can perform at, and there are not many that are country oriented, which doesn't really shouldn't surprise anyone because when Israel was founded, it was much more European and European influenced. And in the last 40, 50 years, it's gotten more and more immigrants from the United States. I would say that probably in the 30s and 40s, when Israel was established and there were Jews from America who came to Israel, they probably were still more European in outlook and culture than they are today, in the sense that most American Jews today who, you know, like rock and roll or who like country or who like whatever hip hop, whatever the definite, big modes of music are in America, what was big in Israel 60, 70, 80 years ago was classical music, opera, European modes of music, and then later on jazz and some of the other kinds of styles of music. And of course, Israel has an important rock and pop scene, but country music just really wouldn't have found a footing there, just like it hasn't really in, much of Europe or, other parts of the world. Um, you know, Asia or South America. You occasionally will get a country western club in some place like Tokyo, which will have there'll be some group of aficionados that will get really into, that kind of music, but it's not, it's not the norm. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But on
basically Auschwitz.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that you know, um
I've never seen it.
no, I didn't, but Yom HaShoah starts tonight,
Right.
and there definitely is a feeling, trying to incorporate some of those things on Friday night. But yeah,
Stuff that I never knew that it actually the Holocaust actually started in Lithuania, what he was explaining, and then it moved down to Poland and
I mean, maybe some acts of the final solution were first perpetrated in Lithuania,
yeah,
but
that's what he was saying.
I mean, definitely parts of Europe that Germany occupied were the worst. So that's Poland, Lithuania, Greece, areas that, you know, the Nazis actually moved into. Those were the places where it was the worst. No, do you understand? I mean, like places like Ukraine for that matter, but places that the Nazis had allied with, like the Italians, the Romanians, the
Yeah,
Bulgarians, those countries, while they were allies of the Nazis, did not usually murder their Jews. It was only when the Nazis, in some cases, like in Italy, took over those countries that they actually started rounding up Jews. Hungary, where they only, once the Hungarian government fell and then the Germans came in and ran the country, that's when the Jews were rounded up. The Romanian government did, and it was more complicit than the Bulgarians, for example, who saved their Jews. There's 58,000 Jews in Bulgaria that were saved. They were allies. So yeah, John, we're just coming in. We're talking about the fact that tonight is Yom HaShoah begins, and time of thinking about that, and kind of oh, thanks, kind of thinking about dedicating tonight to that Pope John Paul II helped with what? Yeah, I mean, when he was a young guy in Poland, he was definitely, I mean, yeah, he helped rescue some Jewish friends and some people there, and he advocated for taking care of making sure that the church apologized and made penance for what they did, because at the time during the Holocaust, the biggest thing that the Nazis did was essentially um, kind of make the church back off and make sure that they didn't say anything about the murders of millions of people, including Catholics, because they wanted to keep their property. Something that's called a concordat, which was the agreement between the Nazis and the Catholic Church that allowed the Catholic Church to maintain their property and not be affected by the Nazis, who basically, take over property wherever they wanted. So um, that was definitely a problem. And again, there was arguments within the church how much complicity Pope Pius had during that time, and um, it's still an ongoing discussion to some extent. And of course, the previous Pope, Pope Benedict, was actually part of the Hitler Youth as a child, and was the opposite of Cardinal Pope John this Wojtyła, but again, eventually Pope John Paul II, who was part of the Polish, not Polish resistance, but was an occupied person, and Benedict was actually living in as an Aryan youth, ironically. So you can see how even within the church, you had very different experiences that people had. It'll be interesting to see what the next pope's background is, though we can say that almost no matter what, they will not be in the shadows of the war. Just like this last pope, Pope Francis was number one in Argentina, but number two was too young to really be complicit because he was in his 80s. Yeah, he would have been five during the war. Yeah. Yes. 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 Uh-huh.
Like maybe two of them knew where the writings were.
And they hid them. They hid them in milk bottles, milk jar, milk the metal containers they kept milk in those days, milk jugs. Yeah, and they found a lot of them. They didn't find all of them, but they found many of them. They were able to retrieve them after the war. These Holocaust archive, these journals, these diaries. And so, yeah, that's definitely on our minds tonight as we go into Yom HaShoah and dedicating um, to. No, that's what I was going to get into that, and yeah, in the shadow of that tonight. And oh, I see we got Joyce Schulman on tonight. Welcome back, Joyce.
Thank you very
It's
much. I'm
it's
feeling a
fun.
little better and I'll stay as long as I can.
Well, we love having you. It was good to
Thank
see you
you.
tonight popping on.
I'm happy to
I
be
talked
here.
to you a couple of days ago, and I could hear how much better you were. So it's good.
I'm getting a little bit better every day. Thank
You
you.
look good. You look great.
Thank you.
Everyone says hello to Joyce.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Glad to be back.
Absolutely. Well, we are where we're reading today is actually interesting, thinking about the Holocaust and the darkest days of Jewish history in the modern era, um, and probably ever, forever, because we're going back in time, back to the time of Rabbi Akiva and the Bar Kokhba revolt, which we talked about last week. But the next rabbi we're talking about today, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai or Bar Yochai, we mentioned last week that he was Rabbi Akiva's student, so he's the next generation, which means while he was maybe even closer in age to Bar Kokhba, the Jewish general, he is we know he was anti-Roman, Yochai, Bar Yochai, but we don't know the extent of his support and what it would have meant. because Rabbi Akiva's support of Bar Kokhba led, number one, to his execution, right? His torture and execution, the Romans that we read about several weeks ago, where again his skin is ripped off his living, his body alive, and it was done in Caesarea. Um, the Talmud says it's for his teaching of Torah, but it seems like it's not just the teaching of Torah. It seems like it's the teaching of Torah within the within the within the for the purposes of advocating for revolt. Uh, Look, there were definitely Roman persecutions of Jews who were not supportive of the revolt, but what made somebody the target of that kind of execution, torture and execution, versus another guy who's left alone? Probably the support that he had for the revolt. And we know that Akiva flat out supported it. And we know that his students, his disciples, were killed along with him. Are they just disciples, or were they also soldiers? Which is one of the reasons why in about 3 weeks we have a holiday called Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, which, as I mentioned, is a pilgrimage day. It's considered the yard site of Yochai, who again was not necessarily part of the revolt, but on Lag BaOmer, people go to his tomb in Meron and they have these bonfires. I mentioned they've had some stampedes that have killed people at the Halula, which is called the Halula, the the yard site observance, and it's still attached to Jewish nationalism and Zionism, and in the context of religion and religious Zionism. And so that's the environment that we're going to be picking up at now. So when Bar Yochai lives is about 130, 140 during the time of the revolt, and then beyond that into the 160s, 170s, 180s. And again, to put that into frame of mind, like what we're talking about, right up to the point of like when the movie Gladiator is set, which is like the early 200s, late 190s to the early 200s. That's what the Roman Empire is like in those times. Very large at it kind of its peak of power. There's Roman legions everywhere and throughout the empire. The Romans, as we mentioned, lost 2 legions in the Bar Kokhba revolt, wiped out 2 legions, which is tens of thousands of soldiers. 11 legions are involved in the revolt, but 2 of them are wiped out, and lots of Jews were killed, were murdered. The central part of Israel, around Jerusalem and around Beitar, which was the capital of the revolt, those places are wiped out. We read about it. According to the Talmud, the horses were up to their noses. The horses were up to their noses in blood in Beitar. But yet, the Jews in the north are, for the most part, left alone. Well, they're left alone if they didn't support the revolt. And that is where Yochai, Bar Yochai lives. Shimon Bar Yochai lives in the north. So he lives at least part of the time. He's buried in Meron, which I told you is right near Sfat, not far from Tiberias, north of that area where a lot of these rabbis lived. He also, it says, lived for some of the time in Sidon, which is in Beirut, near Beirut in Lebanon. So he lived all the way up there. Now, there probably were a lot of Jews and rabbis and people who were either involved in the revolt or just didn't want to be around the country, too close to the country at the time. They were brought into it. But it really, is an interesting question. If you think about it, after the Bar Kokhba revolt in Israel, the land of Israel, which again is now called Syria Palestina or just Palestina and then Syria Palestina by the Romans, the majority of the people who live in that area are still Jewish. But many of them have been murdered. And now maybe the population is about 40% Jewish, 50% Jewish, 20% Christian, 15, 20% Christian, maybe early Christian, kind of still Jewish, but Christian. And then the other 25, 30% are probably pagan, not Zoroastrian, not in that part of the world. Further to the over to the east, right? The Jews that live in Babylonia, they're living with Zoroastrians. But these people are living with pagans, people worshiping they're worshiping Jupiter, Apollo. Remember, at the place where the temple was, Hadrian builds the temple to Jupiter. Aelia Capitolina. He puts a temple to Jupiter on that place. So there are a percentage of pagans. We don't know for sure how many. Are there Jews that are becoming pagan? I don't know. But there's probably a lot of Jews who are just like, I'm not that political. I'm not that religious. Just leave me out of this. I don't care. Leave me alone. And there probably were a lot of people like that. Just like in any combat situation, in any time that there's a war, especially one where it's not like an open battle between one country and another. I'm going to ask you a question. We had this discussion in Israel a couple months ago. John saw it right in front of us. We had an Arab driver of our bus taking us to places where Arabs had murdered Jews last year, the year before, right? How does one process that? How does one process being in that kind of situation, living in a country where that guy lived in Jerusalem, the bus driver lived in Jerusalem, and went back home to Jerusalem, but knows where he was and what he saw written in Arabic on the kibbutz Be'eri, where it says, this is your future, this is your fate in Arabic, or Palestine written on the walls in Arabic. He saw it. So what was it like for a Jew who wasn't part of the war to be caught up in this stuff? I don't know. But there's weird parallels. And again, I'm not saying, how the script has flipped now, but there's weird parallels that you have to think about when you think about where are people? And we're going to see that right now. We're going to see that in the story of Shimon Bar Yochai, who is most famous because, according to tradition, he was we're going to see why. He was had mystical powers, had harnessed his Torah learning to literally almost have not almost, he had superpowers. And according to later tradition, he wrote the Zohar, which is the Kabbalistic text, the basic Kabbalistic text. The problem is the basic Kabbalistic text, the Zohar, was written in the 13th century in Spain. We know that. We know it. We know the people who wrote it. We know where it was written. But they said it was written by Shimon Bar Yochai. They said it was written by this guy because of the mystical things that it says that he did. And so they had to attach it to somebody. Just like we talked about yesterday, maybe again, the book of Ecclesiastes is attached to Solomon because of, it says the son of David. It doesn't say Solomon, but whatever. We say it's Solomon. That's what happened with the Zohar. They said it was Shimon ben Yochai or Shimon Bar Yochai. So sometimes it's called Ben Yochai or sometimes it's called Bar Yochai. Remember, Ben Yochai is Hebrew, Bar Yochai is Aramaic. And by the way, remember that. Every time we say bar mitzvah, we're saying an Aramaic word, the son of the mitzvah. We're not saying ben mitzvah, we say bar mitzvah. You notice that? Yeah, but think about it. We use the word bar all the time for son. And of course, we use it in Bar Kokhba. We don't call him Shimon ben Kokhba. We call Shimon Bar Kokhba, which, by the way, when they started, I was reading that book a little bit, the one that I gave you, Mike, the one on Bar Kokhba. When they started finding the letters in the cave that were written by him, do you know what? It was amazing. Some of the letters were in Hebrew, but most of the letters were in Aramaic. And Ben Gurion got upset because Ben Gurion was like, why was he not writing in Hebrew? He should have been writing in Aramaic. And his people, his archaeologists, his friends, the generals and stuff, the people that were fighting, Ben Gurion, that's what he did. He spoke in Aramaic. What are you going to do? Because Bar Kokhba did try to revive and make the Hebrew language the language of Israel. He actually tried to do that. But on a practical level, he wrote letters to the people, his soldiers and his lieutenants and his followers. He wrote them letters in Aramaic because that's what they knew. There is, I know what you're saying. It's close enough, right? But it's like the difference between, Spanish and Portuguese. I mean, there's enough difference that people know it. And the more you know Hebrew and the more you know, like the differences. So Aramaic is somewhere between like Arabic and Hebrew. It's kind of like a transition language between them. So people who speak Arabic understand Aramaic pretty well, and people who speak Hebrew understand Aramaic pretty well. It's kind of a transition language. And by the way, hardly anyone speaks Aramaic anymore. We've talked about this. There's a little group of people in Syria that still speak it, Mandaeans. They speak Aramaic on a daily basis. There's almost none of them who are left. They're Syrian Christian. They've almost been completely wiped out. They speak it on a daily basis. People who study Talmud, Orthodox Jews who study Talmud, learn Aramaic and speak Aramaic pretty well, but there's not many people who speak on a daily basis, except for the Mandaean Christian. There's not many left. But yeah, it was the language of the whole Middle East, Syria, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, whole area. Yeah, we have a lot of prayers in Aramaic. Our Haggadah is all in Aramaic. Well, it's not all in Aramaic, but it was mostly in Aramaic. Kol Nidre is in Aramaic. Kaddish is in Aramaic. And what we're reading right now is in Aramaic. So this is the story about Shimon ben Yochai. Actually, this part is in Hebrew, but this is a story about him. So yes, and he's a Kiva's student. So watch what happens. This is the introduction. This is the first text I'm going to give you. This is from the tractate on Pesach, and this is look. There's no place I can say this is the first time we meet Ben Yochai, but like in the chronology of stories about him, this is one of the earliest about him, or one of the first, like one of the times when we would meet him, and let's say he's in his 20s now. So here's what it says. Oh, and what they were talking about before this is advice that people give to people, but we're not looking at it because of the advice. Well, though I will show it to you since we're in it. But watch what happens. Rabbi Akiva commanded Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai to do 5 matters. What? We're going to get to it. So the previous text is about things like advice that people give. But so you're going to get to the 5 things. I said I'll share it with you, though. I'm only going to share it with you now. You really want it. You're going to want to see it, but it's some weird stuff. So Rabbi Akiva commanded him to do 5 matters when Akiva was imprisoned. So beforehand, Rabbi Shimon said to him, Rabbi, teach me Torah. And Rabbi Akiva said to him, I will not teach you, as it is dangerous to do so at the present time. Rabbi Shimon said to him in jest, if you will not teach me, I will tell Yochai my father, and he will turn you over to the government. Which is weird. I know, that's why he's saying it to him in jest. I'm not sure that story is written the way that they think it is. I think he threatened him before he went to jail. But it says when he's imprisoned. I don't know. Maybe he's being imprisoned for something else. I don't know. Number one, it tells us that Shimon, there's something off on this guy a little bit. I mean, okay, maybe it says he said it in jest. It doesn't say it. She says it in jest. That's the commentary on it. But number one shows you that Shimon ben Yochai kind of says whatever he wants. It also tells us that his father is on the Roman side of this, right? Because if he's going to tell his dad, it's because his dad is a collaborator, not a collaborator, whatever. He's part of the group that's not revolting against the Romans, right? So that tells us a little bit about him. Interesting, by the way, because you're going to see how this goes back and forth throughout his life. So that works. And then he also flat out is trying to blackmail his teacher, right? So Rabbi Akiva said, my son, know that more than a calf wishes to suck, the cow wants to suckle. So as much as you're hungry, right? The cow that wants the calf that wants to have food really wants to have food. But the cow that has the udders filled with milk, it's in pain if it can't nurse, right? It's true. You have to milk a cow that's has that milk. It's painful for them. I was not going to put Mary on the spot, but that's a true story, right? It's biblical. This is Talmudic, but whatever, it's true. So he's saying, I'm like that cow. I want to give you the knowledge, but I can't, right? I'm afraid. Rabbi Shimon said to him, and who is in danger? Isn't it the calf in danger? Because you're in jail and I'm the one at risk. You're already in jail. If that's what he's saying, if he's saying that you're already, we can't do anything to you anymore. So he says, I'm putting myself at risk. You do it, please. Rabbi Akiva said to him, if so, I will tell you a few matters. And here's the stuff that he tells him. And what's interesting about it is it seems like it's in code. Well, I think you'll see it's in code. It's not like the code's kind of wild though. So he first said to him, if you wish to strangle yourself, hang yourself on a tall tree. Now that does not have anything to do with what he's doing right now, but he says this proverb means that if one wants others to accept what he has to say, he should attribute his statement to a great man. So hang your teachings on a big tree, on a big person. Okay. All right. Doesn't seem like necessarily what that means, but that's that's the first one. And when you teach your son, teach him from a corrected text. What does that mean? Rava said, and some say Rav Mashar Shia said, Rabbi Akiva was referring to a new topic. For once a mistake enters one's mind, it is entered there and is difficult to put right. So don't teach somebody something that is wrong, because once they learn it, I'm never going to unlearn it. The next one, again, these are these are Aramaic idioms. Rabbi Akiva further said to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, do not cook in a pot in which your colleague has cooked food. I told you, gonna get a little good. Well, the Gemara says, what is the meaning of that statement? The Gemara explains Rabbi Akiva is referring to marrying a divorced woman in the lifetime of her former husband. As the master said, if a divorced woman marries a divorced woman, divorced man marries a divorced woman, there are four minds in bed. It's a very famous text from the Talmud. When two divorced people, and again, here it says, each person thinks about his current and former spouse, which verses on illegitimacy. And if you wish, say instead that this advice also holds true even with regard to marrying a widow, as not all fingers are equal. And they're not talking about fingers here, my friends. Yeah, you're looking around like that's what it just said. Yeah. So yes, it's a famous line that when someone who has been married before gets married to someone who's been married before, there's four people in bed. Now, of course, for somebody like, Liz Taylor, it's exponential. 60 something people in bed. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and it's one that the Talmud doesn't say you can't get divorced, you can't marry a divorced person, but it says, look, there's an issue there, which is that you can't unexperience things, right? You can't unexperience that. So needless to say, this was at a time when people generally didn't have premarital relationships. So for people nowadays who have premarital relationships, I think the same thing would go for, again, the reality of what relationships we have with us, and we bring them into that next relationship, and so does the other person. So it is a very famous line of the Talmud, and it is something that is sometimes used as a proof text why people who are on their second or third marriage definitely should be cognizant of that. Doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. It just means that they should be aware of that when they enter into the relationship. Not to, again, be naive in thinking that that doesn't exist. So that's why it's there. So that's a very famous part of it. The part, not all fingers are equal, is not as well known. But again, it's possible intimate relations with her second husband might be pleasing as with the first, leading her to disparage and even hate him. Wow. It's not the most sexually graphic parts of the Talmud, but it's definitely up there. Yeah. All right. We're not done. Look, I told you, we didn't have to really look at these pieces, but I wanted you to see the main part was, of course, Rabbi Akiva is teaching his student even when he's not supposed to. Rabbi Akiva continued, It is a mitzvah and great material benefit to one's body to eat fruits without payment. That is, when one lends money and takes land as collateral, deducting from the loan the value of the fruit he eats, both the borrower and the lender benefit from this practice. So this is again this idea of if you if you're if you owe money to somebody on property that if you're a tenant farmer on someone's land, um, it's good for both the um, for the for the owner and for the person who's working it to both be able to eat off of the land. Probably means something else, by the way, too, but we're not exactly sure. It's an idiom. And the last thing is one who performs a mitzvah and retains a pure body is one who marries a woman, as his thoughts will remain pure and he will merit to have children. Wow. The next part, again, is Judah Hanasi tells his son stuff too. Look, again, these things probably had other meanings. They were idioms, they were pithy sayings that people made to help retain knowledge. But the point was is that Rabbi Akiva is imparting knowledge on Ben Yochai. And what was it like to have a teacher who's teaching you from jail? Well, how does that stay with you? Well, let's take a look at the next story, see what we're talking about here. So let's look at the next story, which is a little bit later in after the war is over and after Akiva is now dead, murdered. Rabbi Yehuda, what? This part? Because this part is from Shabbat. And the part that comes before this, they're talking about different rabbis from different generations. And they get to the generation of right after Rabbi Akiva. And there's this Rabbi Yehuda. His name is actually, there's a lot of Rabbi Yehudas, but this one is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Elai. And there is another rabbi named Rabbi Yossi. And of course, then there's Rabbi Shimon. And what it says is Rabbi Yehuda was the main guy at the time. It was like the more famous of them. That three of them, Yehuda, Yossi, and Shimon, were sitting. Yehuda is the son of converts, right? Well, why is that important? You'll see why. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they establish marketplaces, establish bridges, and establish bathhouses." Rabbi Yossi didn't say anything. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai responded. He said, "Everything that they establish only for their purposes. They establish marketplaces to place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them." Yehuda, the son of converts, went and related their statements to his household, and those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. The Romans decided, they said, "Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, he shall be elevated and appointed to the head of the sages." Okay, so Yehuda is now in charge. Now it says, by the way, that there were Jews, there were rabbis who were collaborators with the Romans, and the Romans allowed those people to be the leaders. Rabbi Yossi didn't say anything. He was exiled from his home in Judea, or the central part of the country, and he went to live in Sipori in the Galilee. Again, it's not the end of the world, but he no longer is going to live in the central part of the country. Now, look, eventually the academy is moved up there anyways. At this time, the academy is in Yavne in the south, but it's eventually like not like after this Bar Kokhba revolt, It's going to be up in the north anyways. It's not the end of the world for Rabbi Yossi, but you know, he didn't do anything. He was in the in-between area. But Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who denounced the government, should be killed. They're going to get him. The Romans say he's dead. He's a dead man, which makes sense because Akiva was his teacher. So, of course, now we know where Ben Yochai's thoughts are. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that it says that his father was a collaborator too. His father was working with the Romans, but Ben Yochai is now on the run from the Romans. And now what we're going to read is the most famous part of his story. So how old is he by this point? He's definitely a grown man. He definitely has he's old enough to have a son who's old enough to also be old enough to know better, old enough to go with him into hiding, as we're going to see. Now, it says that the Romans find out about it. Rabbi Yehuda, assumedly because he's Roman, or his background is Roman, he seems to be partial to them. Now, it doesn't, by the way, say Rabbi Yehuda was wrong for saying these kind of things. Rabbis don't say, well, Rabbi Yehuda is a bad guy. You're not going to see that. It's not here. But he does get Shimon in trouble. It doesn't say he ratted him out. It doesn't say he went back and told on him. It says he went back and started talking about it. And then that got back to the Romans. So it's not like he ratted him out. It doesn't say Rabbi Yehuda did that. But the consequence is Shimon's got to go on the run. So here's what it says. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar. So whether he was a rabbi yet or not, he does become Rabbi Elazar, but let's say he's Elazar, his son at this point. But yes, he goes on to be Rabbi Elazar. And we're going to read about him today too, at the end, when we're done with Shimon. They went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them a bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon told you there's going to be some stuff here you don't like, but Rabbi Shimon said to his son, women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveal her whereabouts. Now, it's basically saying, I don't think your mom, will rat us out, but if they torture her, what's she going to do? So, again, there's a lot of heroic women. There's a lot of women who would have withstood torture, but Shimon doesn't say that. He says they're going to torture her and she's going to give up. She'll give us up. Again, not exactly what we want to hear, but, he knew what he was talking about from, number one, this is his wife, and he also knows he's seen it happen. So they went and hid in a cave. A miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray, and then they would again remove their clothes afterward so that they would not become tattered. So, why did they bury themselves up every day? So that they didn't have to have their clothes wear out. They only put on their clothes to pray. And then they would go back into the sand. They're like snakes, like lizards, like animals living in a cave. Now, there were people who lived in caves during this period because, again, in the Bar Kokhba book that I showed you last week, we found one of those caves where people hid out from the Romans. But the fact that they had food, not a lot of it, but a carob tree, that allowed them to live. Now, it says they were in the cave for 12 years, which means that, let's say Elazar is a 16-year-old, 15-year-old, whatever, when he goes in there, comes out at 27. Keep that in mind, by the way, because we're not done with Eleazar. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance of the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated?" Again, we're not sure which Roman emperor this was, but let's say it's Antoninus Pius or one of the emperors who's at the time of the rabbis after this period. Again, this is after Hadrian. This is after this is somewhere around the time of Marcus Aurelius. Elijah is the one who tells him it's time to come out. Okay, that's good news. You can come out. It's not over. They emerged from the cave and they saw people who were plowing and sowing. And Shimon Bar Yochai said, "These people abandoned eternal life of Torah study and engaged in temporal life for their own sustenance." The Gemara relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. So they come out of the cave after 12 years, and they're so intensely powerful with spiritual energy that they blow things up with their eyes. This is why I say they're like superheroes. But are they really superheroes? No, they're almost like villains, right? Because they're blowing everything up because the people are not taking life seriously enough, going about their daily business. He says, all these people should be studying. And a divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave." They again went and sat for 12 months. And they said, "The judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time." And a divine voice emerged and said to them, "Emerge from your cave." And they emerged. And everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. And Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world, as the two of us are engaged in the proper study of Torah." So they come out, and they're still filled with energy. But if any of them, well, let's say if Rabbi Shimon destroyed something, or Rabbi Elazar destroyed something, Rabbi Shimon would heal it. So they are controlling their energy. They're taking care of their powers in a way that will allow them to keep the world going rather than just destroy it. So God looks at these people who come out like as avenging angels out of the cave, and he's like, "No, get back in the cave." So it's a very powerful story. It's a very, very memorable story that people learn that if someone had that kind of power, would they become ruthless in their application of their superpowers? Would they want to come out and just, destroy everything that they didn't think was right? So God's not okay with that. So that's an interesting story. It's a very famous story. And here's the one little piece right here. Because, yeah, this is kind of like the end part of this. So there's 2 paragraphs we'll read. As the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. And they said to him, "Why do you have these?" He said to them, "In honor of Shabbat, Lichavod Shabbat." And they said to him, "And let one suffice?" And he answered, "One is corresponding to remember Shabbat and keep it holy from Exodus, and one is corresponding to observe Shabbat, right? One is Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, and one is Shamor at Yom HaShabbat. Zachor v'Shamor b'dibur echad." That both of them, right? One time the 10 Commandments says Zachor, remember it, and one time it says observe. And that's what the tradition of why we have 2 Shabbat candles. So what this guy was doing with his myrtle branches for Shabbat was he had 2 of them. So he brought home flowers for his wife. He didn't get 1 bouquet, he got 2. He didn't get one challah, he got two chalot, which is what a lot of people do. In Orthodox homes, they get two challahs no matter how many people they have. They might get two little ones. They're called Kiddush challahs because they'll do a blessing over both of them. One for Zachor and one for Shamor. Two. And so Rabbi Akiva sees Rabbi Shimon says how these people are respecting Shabbat. So he thought that maybe they were not being very holy, but he says to his son, see how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel? Their minds were put at ease and they were no longer as upset that the people were not engaged in Torah study. So that's how they felt the balance. It's not the end of the story, though. Here's the last piece of it. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, Rabbi Shimon's son-in-law, right? So he had a daughter, heard and went out to greet him. He brought him into the bathhouse and began tending to his flesh. He saw that Rabbi Shimon had cracks in the skin of his body, and he was crying, and the tears fell from his eyes and caused Rabbi Shimon pain. And Rabbi Pinchas said to Rabbi Shimon, his father-in-law, woe is me that I have seen you like this. And Rabbi Shimon said to him, happy are you that you have seen me like this. As had you not seen me like this, you have not found me in this prominence in Torah. As the Gemara relates, at first, when Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai would raise a difficulty, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair would respond to his question with 12 answers. Ultimately, when Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair would raise a difficulty, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai would respond with 24 answers. So what happened? When he went into the cave, Pinchas was smarter than his father-in-law. When he came out of the cave, Shimon had answers to every one of his questions that he would challenge him with. He'd come back with 24 answers. So he came out of the cave with an amazing ability to understand Torah. And of course, that means his son did too. What do they do with all this newfound power in their well, this next part really is this next part, and I'll share it with you, but it's not really the best part of the story. But Rabbi Shimon said, a miracle transpired for me, and I'll go out and repair something else for the sake of others in gratitude for God's kindness, right? Because God kept me alive in this cave. And he quoted Genesis, and Jacob came whole to the city of Shechem which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he graced the countenance of the city. So it's a story of how Jacob helped Shechem when he first came there. Rav said the meaning of, and Jacob came whole, is whole in his body and whole in his money and whole in his Torah. And what did he do? He graced the countenance of the city. He performed gracious acts to benefit the city. That's what Jacob did for Shechem. Rav said Jacob established a currency for him, and Shmuel said he established marketplaces for him, and Rabbi Yochanan said he established bathhouses for him. All stuff, of course, the Romans did for the people. They're saying that Jacob did that for Shechem 2,000 years earlier. In any event, clearly, one for whom a miracle transpires should perform an act of kindness for his neighbors as a sign of gratitude. He said, is there something that needs repair? And they said to him, there's a place where there's uncertainty with regard to ritual impurity, and the priests are troubled by having been forced to circumvent it, which means there's dead bodies in this place. Shimon, you got to help us figure out, are there dead bodies in this place or not? Priests can't come in here. Kohanim aren't allowed to be in a place where there's dead bodies. So they're not allowed to come there. So there was suspicion, but no certainty that a corpse is buried there. And therefore, they were unable to definitively determine its status. Rabbi Shimon said, is there a person who knows that there was a presumption of ritual purity here? Is there anyone who remembers a time when this place was not considered ritually impure, or at least part of it was considered to be ritually pure? An elder said to him, here, Ben Zakkai, right? Remember the rabbi who got out of Jerusalem, who himself was a priest, once planted lupines that were given to him as truma. On that basis, the conclusion can be drawn that it was definitely, at one point, it was ritually pure. Rabbi Shimon, like Jacob also did so and took steps to improve the city and examined the ground, and everywhere that the ground was hard, he pronounced it ritually pure. There was certainly no corpse there. And every place that was soft, he marked it, indicating that perhaps a corpse was there. And that way he purified the marketplace so that even priests could walk through it. So that's what he did. He helped out a town. Yeah. I told you that's not my favorite part of that story, but I shared it with you because we were already there. Yes, you're going to say something, John. Yes. Why?
Telling Shimon that I want,
To teach you, yeah. To the fact that he's not was in a cave for 13 years with his son, teaching him. I know. I know. Well, what I'm trying to show you is the stories about him. And I'm going to get to a point about him, which I think is an interesting point about not him, but anybody, everybody who lives through interesting times, put it that way. Him and us, Akiva too, but I would say for all of us. This is a tiny little text about him, which I think is important about him, about Shimon ben Yochai, something he taught. I also thought was interesting because it's based on Song of Songs. This is a commentary to Shir HaShirim that we read a couple weeks ago, Song of Songs. And it shows you how the Talmud and the Midrash will riff on a part of the Bible that doesn't seem to have anything to do with it. The text in Song of Songs is his palate is sweet and all of him is delightful. This is my beloved and this is my companion, daughter of Jerusalem. This is what this woman is saying about the man she loves. It's clearly a love poetry. But what is it the rabbis say it is? That is what God says about us, right? For lo, said the Lord to the house of Israel, seek me and live. Is there a palate that is greater and sweeter than that? As I live, the utterance of the Lord God, I do not desire the death of the wicked, but that they repent and live. That's a line from Ezekiel. What does it mean that they repent and live? Let's look at that. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai taught, if there was a person who was completely wicked all of his days, and ultimately he became completely righteous, in his regard, this verse says, the wickedness of the wicked person, he will not stumble over it on the day of his repentance from his wickedness. Rabbi Yochanan said, moreover, all the transgression that he performed, the Holy One, blessed be he, tallies him for his merits. That's what's written. Myrrh, aloe, and cassia were all in your garments. Big Docha, which is from Psalms. These are lines from Psalms. So, yes, but what is it telling us? I'm going to go on a little bit further. I'll show you one other place, actually. It's enough here. If you're wicked all your days and ultimately become righteous, you're forgiven. So Shimon ben Yochai teaches that repentance is what God wants from us, even if it comes later in life. There's another text in that goes, it's not as good as this one, but there's another text which essentially says the same thing. He also puts it in the opposite, which is that if you're very good and then towards the end of your life you give up on it, you're also going the other place. But the rabbis argue over that, and they basically say that's if you say that all the stuff that you did before you didn't mean it. Yeah, and you recant your goodness. But what's interesting about Shimon ben Yochai is that he basically says that repentance is possible. So I want you to keep that in mind because I want you to see this text, which is the longer text that we're going to study right now. And it's actually going to go into next week too. And this is what happens. Now we don't know how Shimon ben Yochai died. And it doesn't even matter because one of the things that we know about is that his son, Rabbi Elazar, is very well respected. And we read a story in this other part of the Talmud, Bava Metzia, this section, which is a longer story, but we're going to see this story. It says, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, found a certain officer. So again, the fact that Rabbi Shimon is dead already by this point is not even that important. I want you to see what happens with Rabbi Elazar here. He found a certain officer whose responsibility was to arrest thieves. He said to the officer, "How are you able to arrest them? Aren't they likened to beasts, as it is written? You make darkness and it's night, in which all the beasts of the forest creep forth," which is from Psalms. There are those who say that he said to him, proof from this verse, he lies in wait in a secret place as a lion in his lair. He lies in wait to catch the poor. He snatches the poor when he draws them in his net. Also from Psalms. Yes, since the wicked are so devious, perhaps you apprehend the righteous and leave the wicked alone. So Rabbi Elazar says to this guy who's working with the Romans, assumedly is a Jewish guy because he's quoting the Bible to him. He says to him, how do you know who to catch when you're catching bad guys? How do you know how to catch the right ones? How are you catching the right people? It's catching Jews. Now, are they bandits like Robin Hood, or are they just common thieves? Well, don't really matter. The officer said to him, what should I do? It's the king's edict that I must arrest thieves, and I'm performing the commentary is I'm performing my job to the best of my ability. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, said to him, come, I will instruct you what to do. As the fourth hour of the day, at the fourth hour of the day, as it gets into the afternoon, enter the tavern. When you see someone drinking wine, holding his cup in his hand and dozing, inquire about his background, inquire what he does. If he is a Torah scholar and is dozing, assume that he rose early in the morning for his studies. If he's a daytime laborer, assume that he arose early and performed his work. And if his work is at night and no one heard him working, it is possible that is because he draws copper wires, which is a form of labor that does not produce noise. So if he's tired, maybe it's because he's working at night. Or he woke up early for good stuff that he's doing. But if he doesn't do those things, he's a thief and you should arrest him. If you can't figure out what he does, you don't know what he does. Nobody knows what he does. And he's tired in the middle of the day. It's probably because he's robbing people at night. He's breaking into their places and he's stealing from them. Now, again, right? It can be assumed he was awake previous night because he was stealing, and that's why he's now dozing out. Now, that's crazy, right? But there's a logic to it, I guess. But here's what happens. The matter of the advice of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, was heard in the king's palace. And the king's minister said, let the reader of the letter be its messenger. Another Aramaic phrase that basically says, the guy who thought of it, he's going to be the guy who does it. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Shimon, offered the advice. Let him be the one who implemented it. And they brought Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, to the authorities, who appointed him to the task, and he proceeded to arrest the thieves. So Rabbi Shimon's son, Rabbi Elazar, starts working for the Romans, arresting Jewish thieves. That's his job. Probably doesn't make him very popular amongst his Jewish co-religionists, as we would say. So understand that this is Rabbi Akiva's student, Rabbi Shimon, who we heard his father was part of the authorities, was his father worked with the Romans, but then he's on the run from the Romans for 13 years. Rabbi Elazar is in a cave hiding from the Romans who are trying to kill him and his dad, and now he's working for him. You understand what I'm saying? This story basically says the Talmud knows this. They don't forget what happened earlier. They're saying the same guy did this. This is the same guy who now later in life is working for the Romans. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha sent Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, the following message. You are vinegar, the son of wine, meaning you are wicked in comparison to your father, the righteous Rabbi Shimon, just as vinegar is spoiled wine. So yeah, you're both made out of grapes, except you're vinegar. Your father was wine and you're vinegar. Your father would never do this. Now that is a low blow. And that is a deep, deep cut on this guy. Until when will you inform on the nation of our God to be sentenced to execution by a Gentile king's court? Right? You are getting our people killed. They're not being killed according to Jewish law. You're getting them killed as Roman citizens.
Whole story about a turn.
A turncoat whose grandfather worked with the Romans. And then you had one kid who did this. You had the kid who became Rabbi Akiva's student, and now the kid's gone back to the Romans. Rabbi Elazar, and you wonder what happens to Rabbi Elazar's to get, right? You'll see. I'm going to show it to you. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, sent back a message to him saying, and notice again, the words that he uses, they're all like shorthand. They're all idioms. Right? I'm eradicating thorns from the vineyard, meaning I'm removing the wicked of the Jewish people. Right? I'm getting rid of the bad element, right? These are bad Jews. These are bad people. They're not bad Jews. They're bad people. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha sent back a note, right? Let the owner of the vineyard take care of his own thorns. Let God take care of it. You're not God. You're working for the Romans. Whew. Wow. Yeah. It's not your job to kill our people. It is an amazing story. Oh, they're getting executed. They're being turned over for execution. That's what it says. Execution that's not a commentary. It says right here, l'hariga, which means to kill them. And he's saying, again, now, this is, you know that this and you know the Talmud kept this story because they want you to know that these kinds of discussions happen in our community. These kind of discussions, and by the way, you tell me who's right or wrong in that. Because they kept both sides. They didn't give you an answer. No, the story's not over, but it's not the way I'm going to show you the end of the story, even though this is not really the point of it, but I'm going to show it to you since we're already opened here. Because the story doesn't end in a happy way, or even a way that you're going to probably find much comfort in. But that's not the point. Up until this point, and I will promise you, there is no judgment that what Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha said was wrong. As a matter of fact, I would say they let him have the last word.
During current time, whatever current time you were at the time, do senior rabbinical leadership, wherever they are, do they edit the Talmud, or is it done being edited?
No, they haven't edited it. It hasn't been edited. It's a good question. Hasn't been edited in over 1,000 years.
Right, so 1,000 years
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
Because it's happening at that time, and they foresaw it was happening at that time. New York accent, if they foresaw that if it happened then, it's going to happen in the future.
Could be. Yeah. It could be that they saw that this is part of the cycle. The cycle. Yeah. This is the cycles that people go through when they're being pushed in different directions and trying to find the right thing to do. I will tell you that some of the Talmud copies were edited, and they were edited specifically for anti-Christian, which we're going to look at. but there were anti-Jesus texts in the Talmud, and the rabbis cut it out. They took it out because the Talmuds would get burned over it. And the rabbis basically said, look, this is not, there's no law we're deriving from these texts about Jesus. So they took out the passages. There were 3 or 4 lines. They took them out. Now we have copies of the Talmud that those texts are not there. So now we publish them with them, and we'll say, okay, yeah, we have a Talmud where those 4 lines are taken out. It's not a lot, but it didn't matter because they would burn it. The church would burn it because of its anti-Christian, those passages. So literally think about this. There were 4 lines in 17 volumes of books. You have 17 volumes of books. They're about this big. There's 4 lines in all those 17 volumes that are problematic. That was enough to have it burned. And so the rabbis basically said, are you nuts? Take it out. It's not that important. It doesn't affect anything. It's not going to affect anybody's understanding of Judaism or even Christianity for that matter. Who cares? Take it out. And they did. They excised it. So we have copies of the Talmud that is not there. Now, again, we know where it was. We know what the text is, and we put it back in. But it doesn't change. I mean, like I said, I'll show it to you. You'll see with your own eyes. It's stupid. It's not that it's stupid. It's just wasn't worth having the Talmud burned over. So let us take a look. And I'll just show you the way the story ends. Because again, when Rabbi Korcha says it to him, Yoshua ben Korcha, that's a problem, because he's another rabbi. When a random guy says it, it says one day a certain laundryman met Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, and called him vinegar, son of wine. And Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, said, from the fact that this man acted so insolently by vilifying a Torah scholar, one can conclude that he is a wicked person. And he told the authorities, arrest that man. And they arrested him and condemned him to death. So you can see how it was totally different when some random guy said it to him. Yeah, he got the guy arrested. Right? Because he insulted him. I told you, not exactly the story you want to see. After his mind settled, his anger abated, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, regretted his hasty decision. He went after the laundryman to ransom him and to save him from execution, but he was unable to do so. He read the verse about him, whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps his soul from troubles. I.e., the laundryman had the laundryman not issued his derogatory comment, he would have been spared his fate. Ultimately, they hanged the laundryman. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, stood beneath the gallows and wept. Those who were present said to him, our teacher, let it not be bad in your eyes that you cause his death. As this laundryman was a wholly wicked person, you should know that he and his son both engaged in intercourse with a betrothed young woman on Yom Kippur. Turns out he wasn't a good guy. Now, by the way, in your mind, you're going to be like, what? Well, first of all, you're not supposed to have sex on Yom Kippur. Okay, fine. But they didn't just have sex with somebody on Yom Kippur. A father and a son both had sex with the same woman on Yom Kippur, and she was betrothed to somebody else. So it's like, I don't know, like it's almost as if that really didn't happen, but he was a really bad person and he would have done all those things. So the guy that you had killed turned out to be a really bad guy. Now, the examples that they use are silly for us because none of these things would get you killed. But from the standpoint of who he is, they're basically saying this guy had no morals whatsoever. Again, the modern equivalent would be, well, I don't want to say what the modern equivalent would be, but basically, again, this is not a good person that ended up getting killed. Okay, fine. Not exactly, like I said, it's not the point. I didn't want you to necessarily look at that story and go, oh man, what a weird ending. But that's not the ending of the story. And this is where we're going to move to. And this is going to be the link to next week where we read about Rabbi Judah Hanasi, the rabbi who is his colleague, the colleague of Rabbi Elazar, and the guy who comes out of this story that we're going to read about now. So we started with Shimon, we moved to Rabbi Elazar, but we're going to go back to Shimon right now, in a way, in the way that we know. The most famous part about Rabbi Shimon that you need to know is the cave story. That's what he's most known for, is the cave, being in the cave with his son. But here is now Rabbi Elazar. And we know that people still respect his father. But now he's lying dead. He's lying on his deathbed. As Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, was dying, he said to his wife, I know that the rabbis are angry at me for arresting thieves who are their relatives, which is another way of saying, I'm a collaborator. They're not going to bury me properly. They're not going to, maybe they'll toss my body out in the garbage, you know? They're not going to bury me with my dad. Therefore, they will not properly tend to my burial. When I die, lay me in my attic and do not be afraid of me. Right? Don't be afraid of anything that will happen to my corpse. I told you this is a weird tale. This is the weirdest part of the weird tale. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said, and Rabbi Yonatan's mother told me, the wife of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, told her, right? I laid him in the attic for no less than 18 years and for no more than 22 years. So around 20 years he was up in the attic. Really weird, right? Really weird. Not kosher, not acceptable. But wait, there's more. His wife continued, when I would go up to the attic, I would check his hair, and when a hair would fall from his head, blood would come out and appear in its place, meaning the corpse did not decompose. It was still kind of like alive. One day I saw a worm emerging from his ear, and I became very distressed. Oh, yeah, it's pretty distressing that perhaps his corpse was beginning to decompose. But my husband appeared to me in a dream and said to me, it is no matter for concern. Rather, this is a consequence for a sin of mine, as one day I heard a Torah scholar being insulted, and I did not protest as I should have. Therefore, I received this punishment in my ear, measure for measure. That's why that bug was in my ear. Not over. Don't worry. During this period, when two people would come for adjudication of a dispute, they would stand by the doorway to the home of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. One litigant would state his side of the matter, and the other litigant would state his side of the matter. A voice would issue forth from the attic saying, so and so, you are guilty, and so, you are innocent. That's not what it says. A voice would issue forth from his attic. She's telling the story. Yeah. But she's saying that people knew about it and they would come for adjudication. So the body is still giving forth judgments. And I don't know. That's what they're saying. The Gemara relates, one day, the wife of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, was quarreling with a neighbor. The neighbor said to her as a curse, this woman should be like her husband, who was not buried. She shouldn't be buried either, right? That's the curse. Uh-oh. When word spread that Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, had not been buried, the rabbi said, this much, right? Now that the matter is known, to continue in the state is certainly not proper conduct, and they decided to bury him. Now, it seems to be that other people knew that this had happened, and they didn't do anything about it. The rabbis probably didn't want to do anything about it because they didn't want to have a problem on their hands. They knew that if the guy was going to be buried, it was going to cause chaos, because some people would have gone crazy because he was a collaborator, and other people would have said, how could you not bury the guy properly? He was a great rabbi. So the rabbis are caught in the middle of this. They're like, just leave it alone. We're not going to do anything about it. I don't want to hear about it. We're going to pretend like we don't know about it. They knew about it. But once people are talking about it, then like, I mean, everybody knows about it. Of course, everybody knows about it. Everybody's in denial, and they're letting this happen. It violates Jewish law that this guy wasn't buried properly. He's not in a cave. He's not in the place where he's supposed to be buried. You're going to see. So you got to bury him. Now I got to bury him. Yeah. And now they got to bury him. Now they got to bury him. Yeah. So there are those who say the sages found out about Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, had not been buried when Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai appeared to them in a dream. So forget that previous story. Maybe this is what had happened. We've heard this, that Rabbi Shimon came to some of the rabbis in a dream and said, I have a single fledgling among you, my son, right? And you do not wish to bring it to me by burying him next to me? So Rabbi Shimon haunts these guys in their sleep and says, I want my son buried next to me. His body's got to be there. Consequently, the sages went to tend to his burial. The residents of Achbaria, the town where the corpse of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, was resting, did not allow them to do so, as they realized that all the years that Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, had been resting in the attic, no wild beast had entered their town. The townspeople attributed this phenomenon to his merit, and they did not want to lose the protection. They think that there's some weird talisman there. It's been good luck. It's crazy, right? The story is nuts. And this story, again, is a story which the rabbis are not going to say didn't happen. I mean, they said, look,
Think about it. 2,000 years later, 1,000 years later. Why, like, people are studying this. They have to have the same thoughts, like, come on. What lessons in it?
well, let's finish the end of this. Let's see what you see. So again, Achbaria is somewhere near, in the same area, near Sfat, in that area, the general area, little village. They don't want to lose their dead rabbi. Their dead rabbi has been protection for them. It's not over. It's almost over. One day, which was Yom Kippur Eve, everyone was in the town was preoccupied with preparations for Yom Kippur. And the rabbi sent a message to the residents of the adjacent town of Beeri, not Be'eri, but Beeri, instructing them to help remove the body of Rabbi Elazar from the attic. They removed his bier and brought it to his father's burial cave. So they knew the people in that town weren't going to let go of the body. So they told the people in the next town over, get in there and get the body and get it out of there. Can't have this anymore. This is, first of all, by the way, just so you know, this kind of behavior, this stuff is normal. It's normal. It's normal in the Roman world. It's normal in pagan societies to have a body lying in state and that it brings you good luck and that you should do everything you can to protect the body of the person that is your good luck charm. What am I talking about? Well, folks, there's a place in the center of Moscow called Lenin's tomb, and Lenin's body was there for 100 years so that people could come there on their wedding day of all times, including, and come there and get their picture taken with Lenin at Lenin's tomb. There are people who lay in state for decades. John Stolman just said he just asked Glory to keep him in state, lying in state. People do it for a few weeks. I forget how long Eva Peron was lying in state for, but yeah, people do it. And I will tell you that people would fight over pieces of somebody's bones that they would have in some piece of bone or maybe the heart. But these are all over Europe. These are pieces of a saint, right? This is a bone fragment of Saint Boniface. This is a piece of the bone of, see if you can find another one. This is a piece of the bone of finger bone. Yeah. So people keep a part of a saint all over the Christian world. So, and of course, they do it in Asia too. There's Buddhist stupas that have a piece of a bone of somebody. There's a tooth of Buddha in Sri Lanka that, and people fight over this stuff. I mean, people kill over this stuff. There's people who've gone to war over the control of, somebody's St. John's arm. I mean, people would kill over these things. So the fact that this existed in this story is not one where, you go like, how weird is this? No, it's actually fairly normal, except in Judaism. You're not supposed to do this. And so they have to get other people to come in and steal the body and get it to the tomb. So they got it to the tomb. They get it to Shimon's burial cave, which again is in Meron. We know where this place is. I said people come here every year on Lag BaOmer. We'll do it next month, and they'll have a crazy party in front of this tomb, hoping that his powers are going to pass to the people who are there. Yeah, we don't do that because we don't have but we're doing a little version of it. Watch what happens at the tomb. They found a serpent that had placed its tail in its mouth and completely encircled the entrance to the cave, denying them access. They said to the serpent, "Serpent, open your mouth to allow a son to enter next to his father." It opened its mouth for them and uncoiled. And they buried Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, along his father. So Elazar's final repentance, if you will, is that he does get to be buried along next to his father. That Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar are reunited again in the cave, in the burial cave. So this story is an interesting story. It's not the end of the story, though, because I'm going to tell you, now that Rabbi Elazar is dead, the question is, well, what happens next? What happens to his family? What happens to his son? And I'm going to show you, because most people don't talk about what happens to his son. I don't know why, really. I think I do know why, but I think it should be talked about. I know why it's not, but it should be. I'm going to show it to you. So first of all, let's look what happens. After this incident, Rabbi Judah Hanasi, who, is a colleague of Rabbi Elazar, he's the one who's from the lineage of Rabbi Hillel. He's the one who's going to be the head of the Sanhedrin. We're going to talk about him next week. But this is the linking story to them. Because Rabbi Judah Hanasi says, he sent a message to the wife of Rabbi Elazar, the widow, and he said, we should get married. She sent a message back. Shall a vessel used by someone sacred, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, be used by someone who is relative to him, profane? So something that was used for Kiddush wine, should we hold, that cup to be used on your average ordinary drinking day? Right? Should that be your beer mug? The Kiddush cup. She compared herself to a Kiddush cup, and she's saying, not going to be used by you. There in Eretz Yisrael, right? Because they're writing this in Babylonia, they say they use the colloquial adage. In the location where the master of the house hangs his sword, shall the contemptible shepherd, should he hang his basket? So that's the phrase. Where somebody had his sword hung, should there be a basket hung there instead? Rabbi Yehuda sent a message back to her saying, granted that in Torah he was greater than I, but was he greater than I in good deeds and in doing pious deeds? She sent a message back to him. Whether he was greater than you in Torah, I do not know. But I do know that he was greater than you in pious deeds, as he accepted afflictions upon himself. And what are they talking about? They're talking about back to that cave business, which is that this guy was willing to undergo great physical challenges. Now, does that mean he was a great person? In her mind, it does. In her mind, it definitely does. So, so hold it a second. Um, um, I'm going to show you one more scene of this, um, which we're going to read next week. We're going to read this part next week. Uh, hold it one second. Hold it one second. Um, and here's the part I'm going to show you. So she rebuffs his advances. But now let's get to Rabbi Elazar's son. Judah Hanasi arrived at a place where Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, lived, which assuming is this Achbaria town. He said to the locals, "Does the righteous person have a son? Where's Rabbi Elazar's son?" Which again, he just got lectured to how righteous he was. They said to him, "He has a son who is wayward, and any prostitute who hires herself out for 2 coins hires him for 8." That's what it just said. Now, again, is that meant to be taken literal, in a literal way, right? Is he is he a gigolo? I mean, is he literally somebody who, again, women prostitutes are sleeping with him? I don't know. But there's something going on here, which is that the son is not living a good life. I mean, he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. There's no question. Now, again, the rabbis interpret this as he's so handsome that women want to sleep with him. But whatever, yeah, Mike just said he has this same problem. So whatever, if she's getting 2 zuzim, he's getting 8, whatever. So Rabbi Judah Nasi resolved to extricate Rabbi Elazar's son from his plight. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he wanted it out. I don't know if he wanted out of the plight. He's like, no, I'm taking the boy with me. I'm taking him back with me. I'm taking this young man back with me, back to the yeshiva. I'm taking him back with me. So he brought him back. He ordained him as a rabbi, and he gave him over to Rabbi Shimon ben Issi ben Lakonia, the brother of the boy's mother, to teach him Torah. Which, by the way, tells us that this woman who didn't want to marry Judah Hanasi is also from a family of rabbis. Because her uncle, I mean, his uncle, this boy's uncle, her brother was a rabbi, Rabbi Shimon. Another Rabbi Shimon, a different Rabbi Shimon. But his grandfather's Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, one of the greatest rabbis of all time. Of all time. His uncle is this other Rabbi Shimon. His father's Rabbi Elazar. He's from this great family, and look what he's doing. Interesting, right? What do you think when people study this in yeshiva? What do you think they think when they're reading this? If they're reading this in some yeshiva in Brooklyn right now, what do you think they're thinking? They know that this is possible because it happened in the Talmudic. It's in the Talmud, and not just to some random guy, the guy that's one of the greatest rabbis of all time. They believe the Zohar was written by this guy's grandfather. Each day, the boy would say, "I'm going back to my town." Going back home. Because it was difficult for him to study? Yeah, maybe because he didn't like it. But Rabbi Shimon ben Issi ben Yilkonia said, "You've been made wise, and a golden cloak has been spread over you when you were ordained, and you were called by the title rabbi. And yet you say, 'I'm going back to town'?" The boy said to him, "I vow that this thought of leaving is now abandoned." So he says, "I promise I'll give up that way." It says, when the boy matured, he became a Torah scholar. He came and sat in the academy of Rabbi Judah Hanasi. He sits in the main academy. He comes into the main room. Rabbi Judah Hanasi heard his voice and said, that voice is similar to Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. And the people who were there said to him, it's his son. Wow. He hadn't seen the guy in a few years. Didn't recognize him anymore, right? Last time he saw him in the town, the guy was probably looking like he's not looking like a rabbi. Not looking like a rabbi. And Judah Hanasi said to him, about him, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that is wise wins souls. The Gemara explains with regard to the verse, the fruit of the righteous, that is referring to Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. That was his name. We finally get his name, Rabbi Yossi. He was the son of a righteous individual and became a scholar in his own right. When the verse states and that he is wise and wins souls, that is Rabbi Shimon ben Issi ben Lakonia, his uncle, who successfully helped Rabbi Yossi reach his potential. Wait, I'm not done yet. Wait, just listen to the last part. When Rabbi Yossi died, he's brought back to the cave, the burial cave. What's going to happen? The serpent encircled the entrance of the cave, denying any access. Those present said to it, serpent, serpent, open your mouth, so that a son may enter next to his father. And the serpent did not open its mouth for them. The people there thought that Rabbi Yossi was denied burial alongside his father because this one, Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, was greater than that one, Rabbi Yossi. And a divine voice emerged and said, it's not because this one is greater than that. Rather, it is because this one, Rabbi Elazar, experienced the suffering of the cave, while that one, Rabbi Yossi, did not experience this. It all went back to that, hiding in the cave. The suffering that he went through for 13 years elevated his soul to a point where he deserved to be in the cave. But something obviously diminished. Something was lost over the generations. And you can see that Rabbi Elazar, for what he did and for his life that he lived, which was, again, collaborating, he doesn't get away with it. In the sense that his son does not have the same, even though his son comes back, Rabbi Yossi comes back, it was not the way it should have been. Now, the rabbis take away a lot of stuff from this, not least of which is, don't just tell me because your father was a rabbi or because your grandfather was a rabbi that you're going to be okay. I hear this all the time. I mean, sometimes they really respect your yichus, your lineage. It's called yichus. It's important. It's not that it's not important. It is important, but it doesn't mean anything in the sense that it doesn't guarantee anything. It helps if it helps. It helps if you're doing the right thing. It helps if you don't stray off the path. But don't think that it's going to stop you from straying off the path. And so the rabbis take away from this that it's very hard to have generational integrity, if you will. They say it's not anyway a foregone conclusion. It's not easy. Interestingly, they say that if you can keep it going for 3 generations, probably going to be okay. If you can keep it going for 3 generations intact, generally you're going to be okay. Something's stuck. But they realize that it's very hard to do and that it doesn't happen a lot. And they saw it happen with the kings. They saw it happen with King David and King Solomon. By the time of Rehoboam, by the time of King David's grandson, they went off the rails. So they know it's very hard to keep. A good king, whatever, one of the Maccabean kings was a good guy. The next one was a schmuck. It's terrible. It's very hard to keep this stuff going. And it doesn't mean that just because your father was good that you're going to be good. And on the contrary, just because your father was bad, it doesn't mean that you're going to do bad. But there's no guarantee. And the rabbis are very clear with that. And they will tell you there's descendants of Baal Shem Tov, the greatest Hasidic rabbi, that were great rabbis, but there were also people that were descended from him who didn't turn out to be so good. So there's no guarantee. If it works, yes, it's a sign that, that maybe there's something special in your DNA, but it's not a guarantee. So I find it interesting, again, when we look at this story, that the rabbis are going to not, they're not going to shy away from the faults that these people make. Again, sometimes they do kind of cover it up a little bit in the sense that they're, going to say the guy wasn't, maybe there was something that the guy didn't know. It turned out the guy was really a bad guy that he informed on, whatever. But they're very careful also to not take sides in some of these disputes, especially between the rabbis. And if one rabbi says that this person was wrong, and there might be a part of that that's true, they kept it. John, you were going to say something about this guy, maybe about Rabbi Elazar.
No, 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 because now the moral is all wrapped. It makes sense to me.
Now,
I still
most people don't read the last part. They don't read the part about Rabbi Yossi. They don't. A lot of people don't know that part, which, like, it's clearly connected. The whole story you got to read is. Now, I skipped over it. I promise that part of it we're going to go back and read. The part about Rabbi Judah Hanasi we're going to read because we were introduced to him just now. He's part of that Shimon story. He's woven into that, and we're going to see a little bit next week. We're going to read a little bit about his interactions with Rabbi Elazar, because they interact with each other, and that rivalry between them, both having fathers that are important, is definitely an interesting thing to see, is what happens amongst these dynasties, if you will. What happens amongst these rabbis who have competing lineages, and this issue that don't just tell me because your father was a great rabbi that you're going to be a great rabbi. Rabbi Elazar's son, for a part of his life, was a gigolo slash whatever you want to call him. Whatever he was doing was not what he was supposed to be doing. And we're going to read. And Rabbi Elazar turned in his own people.
Dad was cooperative.
Yep.
So, they're forgetting.
It shows you how people navigated their lives around the Romans, what they had to do, what they did to survive, and what they did to get through life. And sometimes they made the wrong decisions, and sometimes it was maybe the best decision they can make. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, especially thinking about the Holocaust tonight, thinking about the Judenrat, the Jewish councils, whose job it was to turn over a certain amount of Jews for the camps. The Warsaw Ghetto, the Vilna Ghetto. They had Judenrats. They had Jewish councils, and the job of these people was to create those lists. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Some of these people put their families on there to show that they weren't showing preference to their families. Some of the people did everything they can to make sure that their families would survive. Eventually, they were rounded up too and died. But the people who made the excuse, somebody has to do it. Somebody's going to do it. I'm going to try to be as careful as possible. I mean, maybe in this weird warped logic that they had, I'm going to send people off who have less of a chance to survive. I mean, who knows? Who can make these kind of decisions? But people were forced to make this decision not 2,000 years ago, but 80 years ago, 85 years ago. They made these decisions. People literally were given this, put 20 names down on the list today. So, this is not theoretical, and this was an ancient history. And so tonight, again, as we go into hopefully a time of remembrance, we're going to have Margot is going to come on Sunday. She just emailed me today to confirm that she's going to come to our Sunday school on Sunday. She's well enough to come, God willing. I mean, I'm hoping. Yep, her books are. I know. The books came out again. I know. Shouldn't have. But Margot is going to talk to our kids about her experiences. And she said she's going to speak to them about her life when they were there, when she was their age, living in Germany. So she's going to, no, I can't, I'm not going to give them to the kids, but yes, I know where they are. So she said, I'm going to have them sit in a circle so I can see their faces. So anyways, I until as long as we have these people, until again, the moment when the last person leaves this world, I'm going to have these people tell their story to our kids. Yeah, why the Shoah Foundation is this Shoah Visual History Project. Yeah, is so important. But what's even more important now is the fact that we still have a little bit of light where these people can. Yeah. Oh yeah, she's part of the video. She's part of the video. You know what they've done with some of these videos now is they've created. It's very powerful and it's amazing. They've created AI versions of these with people, and they've like the people like Margot that are still alive, where they've asked them questions and they program the questions so that if somebody asks a question similar to that, that the person can ask them and then they respond to them. So they'll say, how old were you? And the answer will be there. And they'll respond to them in the video. I mean, think about that. I mean, first of all, they can do that with AI now anyways. They could create that anyways, but now they can do it with they can do it with people. But as long as they're still alive, we want them to have the real thing, these kids. All right, everybody, we'll see you soon. We'll see you maybe online for Shabbat, or we'll see you next week for class again. So take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.
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 Thanks,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.